Hi.
Hey, how you going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good.
All right, we're gonna crack on.
Okay. Can everyone
So
see me now?
I'm sorry.
Can everyone see me now?
Yep. You're all
No.
good.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, everyone's waving back.
Yeah, good.
So, welcome to Helensvale Library, and thank you for joining us via Zoom. So we've got some people here that have come to see you, and we're going to have a bit of a chat first with the questions that we spoke about, and I'll take questions from the audience as and when they come up, and then especially at the end.
Yeah.
I've just done a bit of housekeeping and talked about you and your books. But just to start off, could you give us a quick synopsis of The Deep, please, and what drove you to pursue this story in particular?
Okay. First of all, I've learned that I'm pretty bad at elevator pitches. So
That's right. Take your time.
No. I'm leading up to it. What I learned while I was studying a bit of writing, especially about this one, is that the best way to introduce a story is to explain that it's about a guy who, or it's about a girl who. So I used to explain the story about kind of the plot. This is what happens. But lately I've been practicing talking about the characters. So, I mean, if there's any writers out there in the audience, just a tip for when you're doing your pitches and doing your elevator pitches and your blurbs, focus on who it's about. Anyway, so my story, even though it's about a lot of different characters, at its heart, it's about a guy called Mac. And Mac is the youngest son of a drug dynasty in a small coastal town called Shacktown in eastern Tasmania. So a bit about Mac. He is trying to get out of the drug trade. He just spent some time in prison. He's a bit of an outcast in his family. Where we meet Mac, he's just been bailed from prison and he has some pretty strict bail conditions. He has to sign in every morning at the police station. He has a curfew every night to every morning, and he can't even get his own pain meds. He's got to go to the chemist every morning to pick up his pain meds. Because of the life he led, he's not allowed to have them on his premises. So it's about him, and how the story begins is his nephew, Forrest, 13-year-old Forrest, washes up on the shore. Forrest is actually the heir to the whole criminal family, and he's been missing for the last 7 years. He washes up on shore, he's bruised, he's got tattoos, he can't really remember what's happened to him, or he's not willing to talk about it. And then that instigates the whole story around, what does this mean for the family? What does this mean for the town? And more importantly, what does this have to do with the rumors that another drug kingpin called Blackbeard is moving in on the family business? That's where it begins, and then it just takes off in a whole bunch of weird and wonderful directions until we have the big climax at the end.
Yes. Oh, excellent. So yeah, I've read the book, so I'm gonna not give too much away because I think a lot of our audience here today haven't read it yet. But as you said, you did there's a lot of information about the kind of criminal underworld and drugs and gangs. How did you research this? Did you have to set up secret meetings with drug dealers, or?
So the idea I got for this book began because when I wrote this book, before I even started writing The Deep until after I submitted The Deep, I was working as a counselor and case manager in a drug and alcohol rehab, working with men. And one of my clients, we had a really tough session. We had a really deep conversation about his life and where it led him to. And then at the end of it, he gave me like this blow-by-blow account of how to start my own ice syndicate. Oh. And it was pretty, like, he gave me, where to get the precursor chemicals, how to cook it, how to, market your product, how to get people, on your crew. And I thought, this is really interesting. Imagine if you gave this information to the most unlikely of people and let them kind of loose on the world. So when I decided on that as the story, I was able to learn a lot from my clients, because a lot of what I learn is just organic. So a lot of the stuff I learned in The Deep, I didn't do any particular in-depth research. In fact, I get enough research. I hear a torture story every Tuesday. I'm awash in content. But also, I did find myself on a few little misadventures because of the friends I was making and because I was really involved in that side of life with my clients, there was a few occasions where one of the new mates I made wanted to go get some weed, and I was in the taxi with him, and then he asked the taxi driver where to go. So the taxi driver dropped us off at this dealer's house, and I don't smoke it. I've never been to a dealer's place in my life before. And so I follow my mate up the stairs to the unit, and then he knocks on the door, and an old mate, cannabis dealer, answers the door with like a hunting bow. aimed at us, and he's like yelling, and he's like, hey, get off my property. And my mate's like, it's all right, brother, just here for some green, and I'm just like there at the back, and my mate's like, come on, Kyle, it's all right, he's okay. So we were there like, oh man, for hours, and this guy gave us the best stories. It was completely off his face. He started like throwing knives at the couch, and my mate like joined in. And then when we left, he gave us like an absolute massive cardboard box full of native honey. Like, it was bizarre. Anyway, so that was a good little adventure. Another time I ended up in a house that has affiliations with certain organizations. I was there to pick up a mate, ended up staying for a few hours, ended up talking to a very high profile, influential criminal leader. And then we ended up on the couch, like sharing funny YouTube videos, which it was pretty cool. And then the third misadventure I'll tell you about is I was with another friend, also with affiliations, and he had to go pick up some money. Allegedly he had to go pick up some money. And so allegedly, I thought it was only $50. So we went around in my car, went to his friend's place. He goes in there to get his $50. And then allegedly he comes out with duffel bags full of cash, allegedly. And he says to me, man, there's a lot less here than I thought there would be. And I'm like, how much did you think of? Anyway, so we started driving, and he said, yeah, if you see the cops, don't pull over. And that's just a taste. There were a lot more than that.
Wow. Oh, goodness. It sounds like you've got enough material there for several more books. That's fantastic.
I do.
It's interesting. It sounds like a lot of people in that world are happy to talk. Maybe people that are, on drugs as well are kind of happy to talk to you while they're in that state. But I was interested that you write about the effects of drug psychosis. So how did you get people to talk about that side of things?
So, I mean, I guess they're not that open. They're open with me because they trust me, because I build up that rapport, and because they know I've got their best interest at heart. But you'll find a lot of people in that world are pretty closed books until you really, show them that you can be trusted. They don't trust easy.
Oh, okay.
But in the topic of drug psychosis, actually, it was right in this room. I had one of my mates. There used to be a couch right behind me, and he came over for dinner, and he was sitting there, and we're having a chat. And then he started telling me about his stories of drug psychosis. So I'll just move that so that I'm not getting shadow on my face. How drug psychosis works, for those who aren't aware, is when you're on stimulants, particularly ice. I don't know what you call it up there. We call it ice down here, crystal meth. When you're on that, you don't sleep. You can be up for literally a week without sleeping, without wanting to sleep, and your body just goes and goes and goes. It doesn't rest. Your brain is not designed to be sleep deprived. And so what happens is you start seeing things, you start hearing things, you start to go crazy. We call it drug-induced psychosis. And he was sitting here in this room, and I had heard a bit of it through client conversations, but I'd never, that people don't like to talk about their drug psychosis because it triggers them, especially when they're going through recovery. But this guy had been, he'd been in recovery for a while. He had some distance from his stories, and he'd tell me about the voices he would hear in his head, like 24/7 for a time, or the things he would see that he was so sure were real, and there was only other people telling him they weren't real. And he told me this really heartbreaking story where he was in his daughter's bedroom, and he just put her to sleep, and like he just sat down, and then the voice started speaking in his ear saying, we're going to come kill her tonight. We're going to come kill her. And for him, it's real. And so he's like pleading with his voice. He's like, please don't do it. Take me instead. And the voice is like, no, we're coming. We're outside right now. We're outside the window. And he's telling me this story. And I'm like, I'm used to this world. It takes a lot to affect me. And it was just heartbreaking. It was like, what do you do when it's inside your head?
Yeah.
And then once I heard his story, and his story it got even worse. There's so much more worse things than that in there. Then it started to come out a bit more in my other clients. And I started to realize that this is a real phenomenon, particularly with ice addiction, which is what I was primarily seeing down here in Hobart. So when I was writing the Bluffs, there was a client story that stuck with me. And those who have read the Bluffs know that in that book, there's a message, there's like a Facebook message thread with girls sharing we call it self-injurious behavior. So they were sharing the marks left over from their self-harm. And it kind of builds up. That was a real thing that happened in the high school where I was working as a youth worker. And when I heard that story, it stuck in me. Like it was like an arrow in my chest. Old mate's story about drug psychosis was the exact same. It hit me, it stuck in me. And I thought, this is true terror. This is true horror. This is the kind of stuff that makes a good story. So that's how it began.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? I mean, to do that job that you do, it must be so draining, like you say, to hear these stories again and again. Have you found writing about it cathartic, or do you feel it just kind of it's just made its way out one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, part of being a professional in this sector is you need to be really good at your self-care, because no one else is going to do it for you. So I learned, I mean, I reckon 1/3 of my whole degree was self-care strategies. And I have to see my own counselor once a month. It's part of my contract. You know, I can't do my job if I don't get, we call it clinical supervision. So I get taken care of that way, but I also, the writing itself helps me to kind of marry those two sides of me, because the writing and the creative side is kind of what I feel like I was put on the planet to do. Like it lights me up, it keeps me going. And so to be able to write about these things and know that at least some way it's going to have an impact on how people see these situations, or it's going to help people escape from their real world for a while, or it's just going to help me to put something out there at my own art, that definitely helps me kind of get through the day.
Yeah.
And also because writing's such a solitary thing. So the counseling side is helpful because I'm an extrovert.
Yeah. So you feel like you have a platform with these books to kind of to talk about things. Is there any messages that you're hoping that they're able to convey for you, just to, information or tolerance or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really wary of not having an agenda or not letting it become an issues book, because it gets in the way of the story. But if there's one thing that I have been intentional about, it's about making my main characters people who use drugs, like the main heroes, I guess, Murphy in the Bluffs and Mac in the Deep. I want to reframe that narrative around how those individuals are seen, because I can tell you, working with these guys, some of them are the best people I've ever met. Like no one wakes up one day and says, I want to, have a dependence on drugs. No one says I want to be a drug dealer sometimes, but generally they fall into it, and they're good people. They're really good people. Like they've got my back.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's somebody in your book who, again, without giving too much away, is very everyday, middle class, middle-aged, not somebody who was associated with this world, and then get themselves into it through maybe a misplaced sense of family loyalty, or the idea that they needed money. So do you think it's kind of more common than people think? I guess a lot of people have a perception about, like you say, somebody on drugs, but actually it's easy for kind of any of us to just fall into this if the circumstances are right.
Yeah, it's absolutely, especially, I mean, the thing about drugs and alcohol is that there's so many different types out there that do so many different things to us. And everyone's own kind of genetics has a different response to different substances. For example, there's a percentage of the population for whom alcohol is like an opiate. Like it hits their receptors in a way far different to us. I was having a conversation the other day with a client, and he was talking about using ice with a friend of his who's a lawyer.
Oh.
And then I was like, oh, you know, like they don't really cross my path that often. And he's like, oh yeah, no, the week before was a doctor. You know, I was with a doctor and he was helping me understand, you know, my side effects, and then we were using together. So it's absolutely affecting so many people. It's surprisingly easy to get. And what ice does for you, which I talk about in the book, is it essentially makes you feel like a superhero. I've never used it, but that's, you know, what I've learned. But what it does in that is it damages your ability to create dopamine. So it just puts you in this living nightmare. Whereas if you don't have it, you can't feel those same things.
Oh, wow. Goodness. So with your day job, it does sound very heavy at times. How did you get into it? Is it something that you were always driven to do as a young person?
Yeah, no, I've always been interested in this field. I always felt a bit hamstrung whenever I tried to help my friends. I always wanted to like know what I needed to say, how I needed to say it. So I started with my diploma of counseling, and I would recommend counseling to everyone. I think that the skills you learn in that field are all about communication and listening and the human condition. Um, I fully recommend to everyone, especially if you want to be a writer. It just teaches you about communication. It teaches you about how people's emotions respond to different things. But I began with my diploma, then went into my degree. Originally, I wanted to do private practice as a coach because my degree is also joint counseling and coaching. But I kind of stumbled into a job in high schools, which was very difficult. Working with youth is very difficult. And then I landed this job with men's health, and that's totally my speed. Like I'm really passionate about men's health now.
Oh, that's great. It's great that you have something that I can see, just like you say, lights you up. That and your writing.
Yeah.
Are you still able to do it, or has writing taken over now?
No, so I work part-time now in the drug and alcohol field. And then, so 3 days a week, I'm doing that. And then the rest of the week, I'm focusing on my writing.
Oh, that's great. It's good that you're able to keep up, because it sounds like you'd probably miss it quite a lot.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, it definitely helps with my stories and helps me keep my finger on the pulse, but also we're not really designed to be exposed to that much human suffering. No. So I'm also aware that if I just keep doing this and try and maintain both, eventually something's going to break. So I'm hoping that with the publishing of The Deep, and it seems to be doing really well so far, as things keep kind of rolling in, I'll be able to transition into full-time writing, or at least maybe 1 day a week of my day job.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That sounds like a good plan. So a slight sidestep, not many people will know that Kyle actually wrote 10 full-length novels, I think that's right, before the Bluffs got published. One book a year from the age of 16. What were your topics that you started writing about as a 16-year-old, and then did that kind of gradually become, as you continued with your work and your day job into this, or were you writing something completely different?
I was right. The first 10 manuscripts I wrote. So I wrote a manuscript a year for 10 years, and they were all young adult. And they were all had like fantasy or science fiction elements. Some of them really overt, some of them more subtle. But yeah, 10 manuscripts, young adult fantasy. And because that's what I was reading at age 16. And then, I just kind of enjoyed it. That's what I wanted to be known for. That's where all my great ideas were. And then it wasn't until the whole time I was trying to get them published, going through every route that I knew of, trying agents, trying traditional publishers, trying overseas, trying here, getting nowhere, literally nowhere, no inroads at all. And then with my final book, I got a lot of interest from this New York City agent, a really big agent. And then he said, he wanted me to do some revisions. And then he kind of passed and said, look, this is really good, but I don't have the right vision for it. What else have you got? And that's when I reached out to the lady who would become my agent, Haley Nash. And I said, hey, look, I've heard you're a really good editor. Can I hire you to look through my manuscript and tell me what I'm doing wrong, so I know what I can submit to this guy? And she said to me, I told her a bit of my story. And she said, look, before I help you spend your money, just know that if you've been trying this for a while, maybe you should try something else. like maybe, you know, maybe you should just you give your creativity a rest in this genre and give a shot to a different type of story. And my initial response was, no way, no way. Like, I've sunk so much time and energy into this. Like, I can do this. How dare you doubt me? All those kind of emotions.
Yeah.
And then the next day, I was like, actually, she's probably got a point. And I said, look, Haley, can we have a conversation? I want to hire you for a phone call. Let's talk about where I'm at. You give me some tips about maybe how I should pivot. And so we had a phone call, and she asked about more about my day job, and I talked about my interests. And at the time, I just finished The Dry by Jane Harper. And she said, look, you know, are you interested in writing crime? I said, yeah, absolutely. I love writing crime. I'm working with criminals, but I can't write an adult book. Like, I've written 10 young adult books. I can't. She said, well, you know, you give it a shot. So I gave it a shot, and I wrote The Bluffs in 3 months, submitted it to her, and she's like, Kyle, I'm floored. You know, let's continue this conversation. And that's how the pivot began.
That's amazing. I don't know if you could hear, we had some whoops and cheers here from the audience, because that is really amazing. That's fantastic. And we're so glad you did, because I've read The Deep. It's really a good book. Yes, it kept me guessing right the way till the end, which was fantastic. And also, one of the things that I loved is, and you did it with The Bluffs as well, you set the scene so beautifully. So the environment in this book, you know, the town of Shacktown, the sea, and even the weather play such a huge part in the ambience of your books. And I just wondered, is Shacktown based on a real town? Because you write so intricately about it. Do you kind of write what you know?
It's not necessarily based on a real town, but it's a lot of coastal towns in Tassie have a similar flavor, similar theme. But I understood the energies of my characters, and I understood that the book has a real tendency to go to some dark places. So I wanted the setting to be a counterpoint to that. I wanted there to be a bit of light and a bit of joy. So I intentionally set it up to be a pretty hip, cool, bustling tourist town. You know, I rather than making it, you know, closed to tourists and not like outsiders, I made it really joyful and love and welcome outsiders. I wanted this welcoming feel. But the actual name Shacktown comes because in Eaglehawk Neck, where Shacktown is based, there's kind of two townships. There's Eaglehawk Neck and another town called Dew Town. Now, Dew Town began because there were like one or two shacks there in this stretch on the peninsula, and one of them put something DOO, do, in the title of their shack, and I can't remember what it was. And then the person next to them had another name, you know, and put do in their name, something like, you know, Yakadoo or Do Me Too or stuff like that. And then the next shack then put do in their title. And so what happened is all these shacks caught onto this theme, put do in the title of their shack, and then eventually they became like a certified town with their own like postcode called Do Town.
That's
So
really cool.
that's where I use the word Shacktown from.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I really like that too, like you say, the juxtaposition, because you could have gone really dark with all of the criminal stuff that was going on, but then you intersperse it with, you know, holidaymakers and kids buying ice creams.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I really like that, light and dark.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
And also, a lot of the action in this book takes place at sea, so in boats or in caves or even diving along the seabed. So are you a diver? Were you a keen diver from before this book was being written?
No, I love the ocean. But I'm pretty scared of it. I've got a healthy respect for the ocean. And when I had been scuba diving before, a few times with some mates of mine who was an instructor, so I could do it without my ticket. But I'd never been diving like in that region of Tassie, where it's like in Tassie, the further south you go, the closer you are to Antarctica. And so the water it changes. The liquid dynamics change as it gets heavier and colder, as opposed to the Bass Strait, which is, you know, pretty shallow and pretty gentle. So what I did was I booked in for my scuba diving ticket, and then it got cancelled because of COVID. And so I wrote all the scuba diving scenes, and then it got reopened again. So after I'd already written all the scenes, I went and did my scuba ticket in Eaglehawk Neck. It was cool, but it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying, because there was this moment where like this current swept me off, and I was like trying to steady myself, and I ripped out the regulator of my buddy, just straight
Oh,
out of his mouth. And then he freaked out. I freaked out. He had to grab my octopus breather, put it in his mouth. I'm like, and then I had dodgy gear. My weight pocket fell out and I started shooting back to the surface. And I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to breathe out. Otherwise my lungs are going to explode. Like it was
oh my goodness.
bloody, it was terrifying. And because it's an adventure sport, there's risk inherent. But I'm like, I don't want to do this. I take some risks. I'm pretty, I go to drug dealers' houses. I've got a bit of bravery, but no, I never want to do that again.
No, it sounds like, yeah, there's enough risks with everything else that you do. You don't need to add any more. Oh goodness. So you really do the research properly then. No cutting corners.
Yeah, all the traumas attached.
No. And do you think all of your books are going to be set in Tasmania?
Not all of them, but the next one is probably book 4. I don't know yet. I'm wary of becoming too predictable that readers don't get the same experience, if that makes sense. I'm really conscious. Like what I'm conscious of is that I've got readers who have supported me. They've bought the book. They've given it to their friends. They had an experience with the Bluffs. So when I wrote The Deep, I wanted to, in some way, give them that same experience. I intentionally made the Deep as different as I could, so it couldn't be compared. Like I knew it would be inevitable, but I thought if I make it different enough, people aren't going to be stuck saying, "Oh, how does it go compared to the Bluffs?" But I was conscious of giving the same experience. And so with book 3, I'm always listening to what people are saying about the Bluffs and the Deep, what they enjoyed, what they resonated with. I'm always going to put my own stuff in there because, it's my book, it's my heart on the page, but I really want to give my readers, I want to honor them. I want to give them the experience that they're asking for, that they're hoping for. So I'll focus on Tasmania as long as it serves that purpose. And then the moment that I have a story that's not going to fit here, in the sparse population of Tasmania, or, somewhere it's cold and wet most of the year, then I'll for sure choose a different location. But I'll wait for the story to take me there.
Yeah. Oh no, that sounds like a plan. And talking of plans, are you much of a planner with your writing? Do you do big charts and big plans, or are you more of what we call a pantser?
I definitely fly by the seat of my pants. I hate planning. It drives me. It makes me a little bit claustrophobic. It makes me a little bit edgy because I feel like I should be writing. I feel like I'm not writing here, and it's just going to change anyway. And like if I plan the ending never happens. But with The Deep, I was running behind the schedule for basically the whole thing, to the point where I had to write 30,000 words in 2 weeks towards the end of it.
Oh goodness.
Which was, I didn't, like, it's not Penguin's fault. It's mine. I put my hand up for it. I thought I could do it, but I ended up getting carpal tunnel from those 2 weeks.
Oh no.
So when planning book 3, I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit down. I'm going to plan it. I'm going to be a mature author. And so I did plan it. And actually, since, seeing as you're in my house, let me show you what this planning looks like.
Oh, okay. Oh, we're lucky.
You can turn around. So you see these. Oh, let me turn those lights.
Yeah.
Right. See these sticky notes.
Oh goodness.
So that's how I've been planning.
Oh, so this is your 3rd novel, is it, that we're seeing?
My 3rd novel. So the pink the pink is one character, the yellow is another character, the blue is another character. So I've got the 3 point of views again.
Yeah.
And so I start here. I've got some sticky notes that are about what I think where they're going to start, like how we're setting up the characters, and then I've kind of got different emotional beats right to the end.
Wow, I feel very privileged. We've got a sneak peek of the latest book.
First audience to see it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so we've got some writers that will be tuning in later and that are here in the audience. So what's some of the best advice that you've received about writing, especially writing a second tricky novel sometimes is more difficult?
Oh man. The advice I gave with the Bluffs was to focus on your health, because your body is your instrument. So whenever people ask me this question, I'd say get good sleep, eat well, exercise, because your creativity is an extension of yourself. And I don't think that advice is given enough to creatives. I don't think creatives always understand how your physical activity affects your creative output. This time round, what I learned with the Deep is that there's parts of your story, or at least for me as a writer, I don't know how it works for other creatives, but there's parts where you've got to be a little bit less in your head and a little bit more in your heart. And how I felt that through the book is that I realized that certain characters kind of carried different energies on the page. And I don't mean energies as in like necessarily spiritual or like that new age idea of energy. I just mean like the movement, the momentum, the voice, the dialogue. You know, everyone has an energy they bring to a room. And I feel like your characters have that energy too. And if you don't listen to that energy, you'll end up writing, 50,000 words in the wrong direction, because you're trying to force something that just isn't there. And if someone had given me that advice 5 years ago, I would have just laughed in their face. I would have thought, no, I'm like, that's just like, I can't, what do I do with that? How do I appropriate that? How do I take that advice and put it onto a page? But it's definitely what I learned with book 2 is that if you let your characters go where the energy wants to take them, like the result is so much more fulfilling for the reader than if you don't.
Oh, that's excellent advice. Thank you. I was going to show everyone the book. So we've got some lovely hot read copies of the book. And on the front cover, there's a lovely quote by Australian author Chris Hammer, who calls this book a fast-paced thriller that twists and twists again. Kyle Perry can sure spin a mighty tale. And I was wondering, are you kind of in the Australian writers clique now? Is there a WhatsApp group? Do you all kind of send supportive messages to each other?
I haven't been invited to the big group yet, but I mentioned it in the back of the Deep. There's a lot of authors that I've reached out to that have given me, they've responded. And the four I mentioned in the acknowledgements is Jane Harper, Trent Dalton, Craig Silverton. Is that his? No. So Craig Silvey from Honeybee, and Jane Harper, Trent, Craig. I feel like there's another one. Let me open the book and double check. And then also Chris Hammer, obviously. Craig Silvey, Trent Dalton, Jane Harper. Oh no, it was just those three. And then Chris Hammer, because what I found is that I could reach out to them and say, help, how do you write a second book when your first one's so successful? How do you navigate that? No one taught me how to do that. Like when you're a writer, you learn all about craft, plotting, dialogue, characters, and then the moment you actually publish, no one teaches you how to deal with how that affects you emotionally. So I reached out to these guys. They're like, they're literally literary royalty, right? And they responded, and they had a conversation, and they were like generous with their answers, and I couldn't believe it. But I mean, to be fair, the Bluffs was making some waves. Like I was turning heads. So I guess it's not abnormal to expect them to respond to someone like me, an up and comer on the scene. But I definitely have really appreciated how generous these writers have been with their time. And it just confirms that writing people, the book culture, it's the best culture in the world.
No, absolutely. And it's so great to hear. I mean, everyone lifting each other up and supporting each other can only be a good thing for, Australian fiction and, fiction in general, which is just good news for all of us, I think.
Absolutely.
And so for you, I was wondering, you mentioned some authors that you know, and what makes a really good book in your opinion? So when you're not writing, what books do you like to read?
Because I'm always got a book on the go, I'm always like writing wise, I'm always in a bit of a writing headspace. So I found it a bit difficult lately to engage with Australian crime. Even though I'm been really enjoying Catherine Firkin's latest novel, The Girl Remains. Mm-hmm. But I'm finding, because I'm thinking about books, I'm constantly like picking apart what she's doing in every scene. you can't enjoy that as a reader. You don't get lost in that. So what I've been doing is just going back to old faithful books like Harry Potter or The Wheel of Time, or like, you know, kids fantasy books I read as a kid, Artemis Fowl, stuff like that, which is like, you know, just helps soothe me.
Yeah.
But what makes a good book? It's, oh man, if I could bottle that, then I'm good. But for me, it's got to be, I've got to forget that I'm reading, which is very hard to do. But that's if I feel like after the first 5 pages that I'm reading a book, then I'm too busy. I've got to put it down. I've got to find something else.
Yeah, no, I think we can all agree there's just nothing like just getting lost in a book and you don't even realize the pages are turning, which is so lovely. All right, we're very near the end, but I just wanted to, again, without giving anything away, just talk a little bit about your next book, because we saw a bit of a glimpse of it there. You kind of leave a bit of an opportunity for another book about the Dempsey family. Is your third book going to be in a similar vein, or are you planning to write any more about the Dempsey family, which is the book from the family from the deep, or is the next one going to be something completely different?
At the moment, it's going to be something completely different. I haven't planned a sequel for the Bluffs or the Deep, mainly again because I just want to see what experience my readers are after. So if my readers really want a sequel, then, you know, yeah, cool. I'll come to the party. It's inevitable eventually that I'll write a sequel to both of them. It just depends when. Like, you know, I'm kind of in a bit of a whirlwind right at the moment. I've still got my day job. I'm still, you know, COVID's a thing. I'm still not used to being a successful writer. Like, you know, that affects my day-to-day life as well. So to answer your question, I didn't really answer your question. The next book is not a sequel. There might be a sequel. They're highly likely there will be a sequel. I just don't know when.
Oh, okay, well, that's good to know, because yeah, I loved the Deep, so I would definitely be up for a sequel. And so anything else you can tell us about the third book that is being planned?
What do you? I mean, I'm still planning it out. So I mean, I can't see you guys, but Rachel, tell me how you respond. I'm thinking at the moment it's about a bricklayer in the wilderness of Tasmania whose wife and daughter get kidnapped by a cult.
Oh goodness! How does that? Are we thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up? General thumbs up from the audience for that one.
Okay,
oh,
good.
Goodness.
That.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Hoping for a good ending.
That's
quite a storyline to come in on.
Yeah, so that's how it's beginning, and then because anyone who's read my books know there's a lot of plots underlying, and things aren't always how they seem. So it'll be. But one thing I have done so far, without giving too much away for the Deep, is I always want to leave a happy ending. I want my readers to walk away satisfied and like in a good mood, because I don't. If a book is too bleak, I won't pick it up again, and I won't read anything by that writer anymore either, because my job's so bleak. I need a positive experience.
And it's great that you finish on notes of redemption and positivity, especially given writing what you write about. So no, absolutely, like you say, it would be too much if it all ended on a huge downer. All right, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of my questions. But I thought I would throw the floor open to the ladies and gentlemen that we have here. So does anyone have any questions of their own for Kyle? Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, that was, We've had a question from beyond. How do you select the names for your characters? Oh, okay. So a question was, how do you select the names for your characters?
With very great difficulty. I need the name first, because the name is like a face for a reader. You know, the name becomes the face of your character. So it takes me a lot of time to settle on a name. And what happens is there's been a lot of, like, the character of Shelby in this book. She started off, her name was Pink. That was like her nickname.
Oh.
So she was like a bit of a rock star. She was, you know, kind of a little bit based on the actual rock star Pink. And then her character, her energy wasn't fitting. So I had to change her name. And the moment I changed her name, I then had to change the whole character as well. So names are really important to me. How I choose names is, again, just I think about it a lot. I do a lot of Googling. I think about what certain sounds evoke in people, what feelings certain names would bring up. So in my book, I've got Mackerel, which is his nickname. Instantly, you kind of get that sense. All right, nickname Mackerel, bit of a lame nickname. He probably gets picked on. Something oceany. His actual name is Mackenzie. Oh, that's a bit of an odd name too. I wonder what his family's like. You've got Ahab, which most people are going to think of Moby Dick, right, and draw that connection, and also think probably a bit older. At least that's what I'm hoping. And then I've got Forest, which is, I wanted to be a counterpoint to those two, because you've got two ocean names, and then you've got Forest, which is literally a group of trees.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly trying to get people's emotions to respond, even if their minds haven't.
Yes, because I'd not made that connection until you said it. Oh my goodness, that's clever. Any other questions from the audience? Oh, what's the most difficult thing about writing characters from the opposite sex?
I'm not very good at it, I've discovered.
Oh, we disagree.
No, I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story. Originally, this book was about Shelby. The whole story was about her, and she's like a suburban housewife. She's way more than that, but that's how I introduced her to the story, as a suburban housewife. And originally, she was the main point of view character. It was kind of Mac and Shelby side by side, their energies complementing each other. And my publisher kind of came back, and my editor and a few other people, they're like, a mum's not going to do this. Like, this makes no sense. Like, I don't. And there was a few kind of subtle hints about, Kyle, you write men so well. Like, you understand men so well. And I'm like, okay, I get it. So I'm learning. The thing is, up until recently, I'd never really worked with female clients. Just part of the game I work in is you kind of focus on one side. So lately, I have been working with a lot more female clients. Lately, I've been like engaged in a lot more of that, how that side of the world affects them. So I'm hoping my next book, I'll be a bit better at it. But a lot of it, yeah, I just kind of have to get a lot of feedback, ask a lot of questions, had to rely heavily on people's own experiences. And then also my agent and my publisher have to whip me into shape.
Yeah. No, oh, that's good. Oh, well, we look forward to more in-depth female characters in the next one.
Yeah.
Anyone else? One last one as we're just rounding out. So, what are your writing goals? Is it, do you have a number of books in mind, or do you want to win awards, or tell a message, or be in the Australian Authors WhatsApp group? What are your goals?
My goal is to be able to do this full time and just be able to write whenever I want. That writing is what makes me happiest. So my goal since the beginning is to be a full-time writer. I would love, when I become a full-time writer, I want to release my crime adult books, and then also the same year release a kids book or a young adult book. So
yeah.
that's my goal. I never like, the Bluffs has been nominated Book of the Year 4 times. Like,
well done.
I never expected that. I never went looking for that. It's been awesome. But it's the readers' responses that's the coolest part. Like, it's the giving readers, and I know I keep saying this, but giving the readers an experience and telling a good story is genuinely the best part. So I want to keep doing that full time, but also give that to my adult readers, and then eventually give it to my teenage readers as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh. Have you ever been going about your life and just actually seen someone reading your book in a on a bench or on the bus or something? Have you ever seen out in the wild someone reading your book?
No, I haven't. A lot of people send me messages, like pictures of them seeing it. I see I see people pick it up in the bookshops all the time because there's often, especially down here, there's often a lot of copies of my book on display. But I have to say, the people I mix with don't really read. And because my job's so people related, I don't catch the bus. I can't, I have enough human interaction. Sometimes I just need to just go home and write. So and what I'm saying is it's not really an accurate reflection because I'm not around crowds as often as probably the average person is.
Yeah. Well, I don't think any of us are asking about too much at the moment with one thing and another. So maybe for after all of this, there'll be lots more sightings in the wild.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Absolutely. All right. I think we're about at time. Any last? No? All right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you again to Kyle for joining us this evening. It wasn't in the way that we'd hoped, but we're so glad that you were still able to be here with us. And unfortunately, you're all plugged in, so I can't turn you around to see everyone. But could everyone cheer and clap and everybody get a sense?
That's awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate
it. As soon as you are able to physically come and see us, absolutely, we would love to have you. But just so you could feel some of the love in the room. It's been really fantastic.
No, thank you. Thanks for the great questions, and thanks everybody for coming along, for pivoting in the last week to come and join us.
Yeah, thank you.